Okay, good afternoon. We'd like to dedicate this Dvar Torah. It's been dedicated, by Bernard and Susan Wolf, our wonderful Gabbai and his wife. And the reason is this is part of the celebrations of their 50th anniversary. And it's so befitting that they chose to dedicate this Dvar Torah because they do so much for Limud Torah. I have to say that the Gemara Express, which we do every single morning, is really pushed and encouraged by Bernie. And so it's really fitting that we dedicate this video on the 50th anniversary, and hope that you'll have a lot of nachas and a lot of simcha and a lot of continuation of Limud Torah, and you and Susan and all your family, that you should have only nachas, simcha and hatzlocha. Parshat Eikev deals with the mitzvah Birkat HaMazon, and I'd like to just explain a little bit around Birkat HaMazon. In the Torah we found that there are two types of agricultural gifts, what the Rambam calls matanot aniyim. There is, for example, a type of gift like bikurim. A bikurim is an agricultural gift that we have to do at the beginning of the process of growing. So when the first fruit emerges from the tree, so then what we do is we mark it, we try like a ribbon on it, and then at this proper time, when it's already matured, we bring that first fruit to the Kohanim in the Beit HaMikdash. Then there's a type of agricultural gift which is not at the beginning of the agricultural process, but at the end of the agricultural process. For example, the mitzvah of Peyah. The mitzvah of Peyah is that when a person the fruits have already grown, and the person is already in the throes of harvesting. So then when the person has basically harvested his entire field, so then what he has to do is he has to make sure that there's a payah, that there's a corner of his field which he doesn't harvest, and he leaves it then to the poor people. So there's these two types of gifts. Gifts that come at the beginning of the process of agriculture, and gifts which come at the end of the process. And then if I could just add on, there are types of gifts of tzedakah, matanot aniyim, which are sort of, let's call them in the middle of the process. For example, let's say that a person is harvesting his field, and there are certain sheaves which fall and drop from his hand. So then what he has to do is he has to leave them. He has to leave them on the floor. He has to leave them rather on the ground, and he has to allow that the poor people would take then and pick up these gleanings, and that's called shichacha or leket, and also it applies to shichacha. So that's a type of agricultural gift that it applies in the middle or the process of the harvest. And similarly, just as we have these gifts before and after, so also in the Torah we have two types of brachot. We have brachot that we recite before we partake of a given fruit or pleasure, and then there's a bracha which we recite after we eat. In this case, bread, which is the Torah says, "V'achalta v'savata u'vayrachta." So we've got these two categories. Gifts of tzedakah, they come at the initial stages of preparing, and also the same thing when it comes to brachot. And then you've got also types of tzedakah which apply like after a person's already gotten involved, and that's like payah. And so also one's got type of brachot which comes also after a person has eaten, and then a person has to recite Birkat HaMazon. So in both these categories, the Torah is saying like stop, just take a minute, and then and think before you're doing or after you're doing that. Remind yourself of either the poor or Hashem. So I'd like to pose something that I once discussed with my Rav, which one is more difficult psychologically? Which one is more difficult? Is it more difficult to fulfill the mitzvah of, let's say, bikurim, to a person's waited so long, and now is his first fruits, and then the Torah says that you have to take that first fruit and give it to the Kohen in the Beit HaMikdash? Or the mitzvah of, let's say, Peah. Person is now, finally, the Torah gives him the go-ahead to go and to harvest and to partake of everything that he wanted, and he's now happy with the harvesting, and suddenly the Torah says, oh, wait a minute, you're not allowed to completely consume the harvesting, you have to leave a little bit to the poor man. And so also we can ask, the Gabay Brachot, is it harder to resist? A person is like feeling hungry, they're feeling thirsty, and suddenly they have to control themselves a little longer, and what they have to do is they have to wait, think, and say, give thanks to Hashem, Baruch Atah Hashem Lekol Haolam, for example, Shakol Niyeh B'Dvaro. Or, when a person's already feeling satisfied, and the person's already in the meal, and now he has to suddenly remind himself, but wait a minute, all this was, thank God, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was the one who provided, and now to recite Birkat HaMazon. So, let's see what proofs are available to us. It would seem that the simple let's say, proof that it's always more difficult to stop an activity and then to remind oneself either of a poor person or of Hashem is that is the more difficult one. And what's the proof? The proof is that it's written in the Torah. According to, we know that all the brachot that a person has to recite before eating or before partaking of a pleasure, like Borei Minei B'Samim, any Birkat HaNe'enin, all those brachot are now brachot Rabbanan. The rabbis instituted those, Chazal instituted those brachot. Whereas when it comes to the mitzvah of Birkat HaMazon, the bracha that we recite after bread, that's a Birkat HaMazon. That Birkat HaMazon is mitzvah d'oraita. So surely that shows that that's the more important one, if we could call that. There's also a psychological reason that the Meshech Chochmah speaks about, that it's he delves into it a bit, and I'm just using his principle. The Meshech Chochmah says it's harder in a way to be engaged in an activity, and then suddenly that to interrupt an activity which a person has already started, to say stop, and then to remind oneself of Hashem, of the poor person. It's much more, because, and why is that so? Because when a person is hungry and now he wants to eat, so to carry on the status quo and to continue the state of passivity, of not eating for a little bit longer, is not as difficult as changing the complete nature and direction of his activity. For a person to go from doing to stopping in order to say Birkat HaMazon is much more difficult than to go from not doing and extending that not doing for an extra couple of moments until he recites the Bracha Rishonah. And we actually see this for example, when it speaks about Yosef, that Yosef a tzaddik is complimented and is admired and is extolled for his resisting Potiphar's wife, because as the Torah describes, he already was sort of entangled a little bit in the whole matter. It says that she grabbed hold of his garment, and what he did was he left it in her hand, and he rushed out. So that's the greatness. The greatness is he's already sort of involved, and then what he has to do is he has to stop his involvement and run out. So the same thing, a person's already now, he's eating, he's drinking, he's satisfied, and now suddenly to stop that activity and to think of Hashem, that takes much greater of an effort. And you see it also, if I could just bring a mundane example, you see it with kids. You see many times you say to the kids, please come and do this, and they don't want to do it. But once they're already involved and they've decided, yes, we'll do it, now to tell them stop and now we're going home, that they find even much more difficult. So this is knowing this psychological insight will help us then when we recite Birkat HaMazon, that we have to take a greater time. Sometimes people do Ma'ach Achronim, even not according to that minhag. Some people wear some people wear hats, etc. or a jacket when they recite Birkat HaMazon, but the whole thing points to the fact that now we have to take extra time to sort of prepare ourselves mentally and psychologically to stop now and to ponder to stop the activity of satiation and eating and drinking, and now to acknowledge HaKadosh Baruch Hu's bounty that He gave us this mazon on our table.